Denise Hayman-Loa is CEO of Carii, Inc. Denise has over 34 years of business strategy management experience in technology and financial services. And prior to Carii, she worked for 29 years in financial services and senior positions at places like Salomon Brothers, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Ernst Young. So she's got good insight to draw on. Denise, it's all yours.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for that intro. I was prepared to talk about my 29 years on Wall Street. Now I don't have to. And thanks to Peter especially for hosting this and for being a great partner. We're working on a big initiative together for Connective Earth, which some of you may have already heard of as you may have been invited to the platform. I've really been enjoying all the speakers this week. Great event and great topics. It's been just amazing to hear everybody's speeches and get a really great overview. So as Dave said, I'm the CEO of Connective.network, which is the company that we've developed. The company name is Carii and the platform name is Connective.network. And it's a platform for online communities. And we've been focused on community and digital communities since before it was a thing. And it really is a big thing now, as everybody's probably heard. There's a huge trend towards community, but there's a lot of definitional issues around that. So the Connective Earth platform, again, which many of you have joined, was created in partnership with Peter Fusaro and the Wall Street Green Summit. We're using the platform for post-conference networking and for knowledge sharing. So you should have received an invite, but do let us know if you need us to resend it. So what do we really mean by community? I'm sure all of you have heard the trends for community. It's become a huge theme, which is not only expanded in our current era, but was already trending before that, and it's just going to grow even further. But how is community really defined, and what are the benefits? So community can be defined as people who are connected by a common purpose or interest and who commit time to communicate and engage meaningfully around that purpose. This is especially true for trusted communities, such as what is needed for the impact investment world. It's all about trust. There are a lot of communities on Facebook and other places, but how do you know that they're really trustworthy? So in today's world of impact investing, there are so many disjointed silos and there's so much random information. So if you want to learn more about alternative energy concepts or regenerative ag, how do you find that info and how are you sure it's from trusted sources? So let's say you hear about hydrogen. You might ask a buddy who might know an expert or a resource, but that's very random because how do you know it's the best resource or the best expert for that matter? That's where community comes in. So done right, it provides a consolidated place to go to get and give answers and options. We often see siloed groups that say they have a community, but it's really a combo of a website, a Facebook or Slack group, periodic meetings. Their mission, their goal, their intent is right, but because any community adds value in any form. So that said, a Facebook or a LinkedIn group is not a true community. It is more of a forum based on a single threaded feed. They are just as siloed and there's no real knowledge sharing or ability to cross connect. Not to mention they are owned by Facebook and LinkedIn, so the data is not your own. Impact investors are handicapped by these silos and by the lack of consistent information. They also lack access to top experts and thought leaders and clearly organized investment opportunities. Events such as the Wall Street Green Summit bring insights and expertise. How do you tap into that ecosystem on an ongoing basis? So how do you really evaluate the best investment options in a developing arena of impact investing when both the concepts and the companies are often new? So if you think about it, we're exploring new concepts, new technologies, and new companies that are startup in the era. So with the right community, those who want to invest in impact can come together to gain and share knowledge, find the best resources, the companies, the experts, the content, interact and ask and answer questions, crowdsource those questions, crowdsource those answers, to get a broader view and a context to maximize your investment impact, to reduce the risk of ineffective investing. People don't often think about the risk elements here. I used to run a risk management business at Goldman Sachs, and I wrote a book about risk. So for me, this is a pretty big issue. They can also contribute to ESG results by being active. So the more you know, the more engaged you are, the more active and result-oriented you can be, and you can contribute not only by investing, but by actually producing results. The other benefit of a community approach is the ability to crowdsource questions, crowdsource answers, crowdsource knowledge from all members. to really engage with each other and share content. So when we think about community and community engagement, these are some of the words that come to mind: relationships, support, encouragement, education, collaboration, and commitment to the whole. As all of us know here, there are a lot of trends and a lot of themes, and especially, as one of the speakers mentioned, the millennials are very much about commitment to the whole and about the future, really. And for investing, it also includes the risk mitigation that I mentioned before. When you have an engaged community, you don't need to go looking for them again every time you fundraise or when you want to test a new product idea. If you have kept them engaged, they are there for you and for each other, and you can focus instead on effective investing. So some of our examples of clients that we work with, we have a private equity fund that's focused on social impact that uses our platform to both do due diligence on companies they're looking at, and as well as to engage their investors. Connective Earth is a platform that we built again with Peter that focuses on impact investing, bringing together the entire impact investing ecosystem. So those are actually the end of my prepared remarks, and I would open up for questions, David. If people in the audience have questions, it's more fun to engage directly, and if not, then I welcome follow-up questions.
Well, everybody, Denise, thank you. That was a great intro just to the space, and I think that's this is a really interesting one right now in particular. So everybody, if you have questions for Denise, please put them into the Q&A, and we'll pass them on that way. Denise, maybe I can start off just by asking what distinguishes a community in this space of the climate economy from communities in other spaces?
Well, that's a very good question, David. There are a lot of things that are in common. I mean, a good community engages multiple stakeholders and gives them the knowledge sharing and the engagement that they need. And a community in this space should be geared towards knowledge sharing, just like I mentioned, and collaboration, but should also be geared towards driving action, which I think is a bit different. Like, you hear about communities that are hosted by companies, and they're pretty superficial. They're usually a support or how to use this product, or we have a new product idea. But a community in this space is much deeper and richer. It includes knowledge sharing and content, and great content, curated content, but it also includes the ability for multiple stakeholders around the world to engage with each other and to see commonalities. So I'm sure you've heard, and everybody in the audience has heard, that there are a lot of siloed groups trying to make impact and to do various benefits for the earth, for the oceans. There's multiple groups focused on the oceans. There's multiple groups focused on alternative energy, on regenerative agriculture. But to really bring everybody together in a way to be more efficient and to drive change in a more efficient way requires community. It's not just about posting on a content management platform or putting in an article. It's really about engagement.
Yeah. You know, that's a great point. I mean, the idea of bringing everyone together is obviously central to community. We tend to talk about bringing people together around social and communities as a kind of content-based discussion, though, right? Like it's usually about saying, hey, I'm sharing content and so on. Can you talk to everybody here a little bit of, because this is a data and AI session,
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what community around the data that you're collecting and that we all have would look like?
Yeah, so for example, one of our clients on our platform is a group called Planetary Care, and they're focused on regenerative agriculture, and they're focused on bringing together enormous numbers of people to focus on regenerative agriculture. And in that, to make it rich, you have to have data, you have to have content, you have to have results. And if you don't have the data, people don't understand the context and the magnitude of something. So by sharing data and interacting and gathering data through the community, you can also make that whole experience richer. So another example is we've envisioned, and we're looking for a way to build this, but I have envisioned a climate change storytelling app, for example, using our technology. So think of Waze, Waze, the traffic app, but for climate change. And the idea is that when we have a lot of data about climate change from metrics taken from various sources around the world, but we don't have the real people's stories of what they're experiencing. Like, we've lived by this lake for 20 years, the lake is here now instead of here. Or we've never had this much snow ever, or we've never had this little snow ever. And to bring those stories to life by telling the stories, it provides multiple benefits. Not only does it engage the people themselves more effectively and the people they know, but there's also qualitative data provided. So you can start doing trend analysis on all the people in a certain region telling their stories of what's happened over the past 20 years and analyze that qualitative data to start to see trend analysis. So it's different than quantitative data, but there are ways to analyze it using AI, for example. So that's just one example that I would love to build.
That brings up the issue around the data. That's often the distinction between the data that's created by the system, right? So the usage data or the demographics or what other quantitative data you have, versus the qualitative data that comes in the discussions themselves. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective on different kinds of data sets? We haven't talked about that here yet.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our clients ask for metrics on engagement, and how many people are clicking and all that great stuff that you are used to talking about with Twitter feeds and things like that. And that's meaningful data because it tells you, quantitatively how people have engaged, but it's not very meaningful in terms of letting you know how much of an impact it has had in their lives or how much of an impact it's had in their perspective. And I think that it's not easy to do the qualitative data analysis, but I think AI could help with that, to really start to filter, to start to see trends, to start to see terms that are used frequently, and there are tools to do that. That's where I think the real value comes. We actually have a kind of a fun thing that we've built into our platform called activity coins. And we measure 21 different activities that users perform. Do they log in? Do they click on content? Do they comment? Do they share? Do they invite people? And that gives you some behavioral analysis as well, not just how many times did they click, but actually what did they do? There's 21 of these 21 different metrics, and we give different weights for different activities. So if a client wants to really encourage people to do a lot of inviting or to create a lot of content, then they give them a whole bunch of coins for those. And then ultimately we turn those coins into a token economy that people can really exchange value for their actions. So that's another example.
Are there any interesting insights that you can share with the group around the tokens, things that might have surprised you? Yeah,
actually, generate a lot of tokens because I do a lot of inviting. It's really what surprises me is I know exactly how it's all calculated and I still get a kick out of it. So a grown person, and I know how it's calculated, but really where we're seeing, there are surprises because there are people who are more active than we realized. There are trends that we can see, that we can spot, like how many people are really viewing content, how many people are really inviting, creating communities. So the surprises are really how engaged people actually are and what they're doing, instead of just how many times they're clicking.
Are there specific kinds of content or people or community engagement that are particularly engaging?
I think it really depends on the community itself. We have clients that range from, obviously, Connective Earth is a huge focus for us. So in that case, it's more about the content and the investment, the review of the investments. But we have other clients that are focused on the aerospace industry. We have other clients that are focused on women and gender equality issues and the new way of working. And so I think it just depends on the client and their business model. Our community platform is focused more on multi-stakeholder groups that are trying to bring together a lot of different external organizations into a trusted environment, trusted community. So I think it's going to be different than the kinds of things you would get from a Twitter feed or a Twitter community. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Are there, so one of the questions from the group is just to say thank you, first of all, for the community approach.
Oh, great.
It sounds like the experiences are really resonating with people. So are there, are ESG certificates, for example, environmental social governance ideas, are those certificates worth targeting for maximizing investment portfolios?
I think so. I mean, there's a ton of people who know a lot more about those metrics than I do, and there are a lot of people really studying them. But I definitely think so. I think, for example, we could turn our token economy into a reward system for contributing at greater levels in terms of those different categories, in terms of, you know, environment, or in terms of social. How effective are you in social? How effective are you in governance related issues? There's definitely a whole token economy, and there's a lot of study that's been done around token economy behaviors. Because that's a complex, it's partly, you know, behavioral finance and partly economics. So there's probably, it's a longer conversation, but I'm really looking forward to being able to integrate some blockchain technology and some token economy technology into the platform. We've been studying that for 3 years, and we're waiting for a few clients to hit that bid so that we can get that done.
Nice. Yeah. What would you like to see? I know I asked this of one of the other panelists, but what would you like to see the market focusing on in this space that it's not around? And specifically, I mean, to your point, I appreciate that the company does more than just climate economy work. What would you like to see the market focusing on in this space around climate specifically that it's not?
Besides my app, besides my Waze app, that's what I'd like to see. I just want to see change. I want to see things get better. I mean, we have listening to the speakers today, especially, just really drove home the kinds of numbers and the kinds of things we're dealing with, and it's an existential stage we're at. And I don't remember if it was Luis or David or Gabrielle who really, they gave a lot of numbers that were very scary. And anything we can do to bring together stakeholders, to eliminate inefficiencies, and to build trust between parties so they work together on things instead of working at cross purposes, I think would be a huge value to the earth and to climate. And I want to build my app.
That's a good one. That's a good one to include in there. When you know, often I brought this up with Peter a little bit, but you know, often we end up with data, and particularly like large behavioral based data, you know, plays to the biases that we go in with. How do you think we should be thinking about challenging our own biases around solutions in climate?
Wow, that's a philosophical question. We could talk for hours about that, but I mean, it really is about unpeeling where we're coming from, and events like this really help, because I learned some things that I didn't know and that impacted my thinking even just today. But it's about continuing that conversation, and you know, an event is a moment in time, and the point of a community is to keep that conversation going so that change can really happen, so that we all realize that there are new ways to think and come together to think in those new ways, because innovation happens with people coming together, not just with one person by themselves in their room.
Yeah. You're playing with a lot of the data around kind of how those biases play out in the communities. Is there anything that the group can learn from your experience, kind of making more transparent those biases through the data?
Well, I mean, I really think the most important thing is building trust between parties, and you have to be careful with the data. I mean, our premise, and from the beginning with our platform, is that our clients own their own data, that we don't own it. And that's what helps build trust. And while you can use the data productively, you have to tell people that you are. And you have to also put in place procedures to encourage that kind of data gathering, but without invading privacy. I mean, there's a delicate balance there in terms of privacy. I mean, a lot of the public social media networks, they make their money off of your data, and we don't do that.
The last question to end on then, since this is a Wall Street Green Summit, if you were advising investors, around this idea of community and looking at the markets through a community lens, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that there's a lot of trend analysis, there's a lot of substance you can gather by participating in the community, by seeing where the conversations are, by learning from others and the experts in the community, and avoiding risk and investing in the right things.